Howdy, Sako knots. Joyous time zones. Welcome to Sako and the Moon, talking about making compelling characters today. And here is my other half, the Moon.
I am Ssn1 Ep3. I'm the Moon. And let's create some characters, right?
Yeah, let's get into it.
I got my coffee here.
Got my notes.
Let's do the things.
Explore strategies for crafting memorable and relatable characters in horror fiction, specifically. Welcome to the Sako and the Moon by a couple of self-publishing horror authors. This is where we explore the world of self-publishing in the horror genre. In today's episode, we are diving deep into developing compelling characters, one of the primary components to a wicked story. Define characters' goals, fears, and desires for depth. Establish motivations that drive actions, particularly in horrifying situations. Crafting clear and compelling motivations adds complexity to the characters, making them more nuanced and engaging. In the face of horror, these motivations become the driving force behind characters' decisions and reactions, enhancing the overall impact of the narrative. The depth of the character motivations contributes significantly to the immersive and chilling experience of the story.
Pretty solid.
Pretty solid.
That's the episode. There you go. Good night, everybody.
Introduce imperfections for relatability. Create characters with flaws that resonate. I have to agree with this. These imperfections make characters authentic and accessible to the readers. The presence of internal struggles enhances relatability. When characters grapple with challenges, readers form deeper connections. Imperfect characters become vessels for reader empathy, forging a more engaging and emotionally resonant narrative. So, create depth, right, with flaws and specifically flaws and goals and motivations.
Yeah. You don't want everything to be like unilateral. You want to try to avoid unilateral things being unilateral. There's a word I can't think of it to say it. And you want to have, like, when we're talking about creating like a good story, we want to have, like, there's the main thing, the through line that we're working on. There's always something else that the people are dealing with at the same time. Some other sort of angst taking place at the same time, and that's really important for a compelling story, and it's equally as important for a compelling character. Sometimes it's the other struggles the characters are going through. Sometimes it's other factors they're dealing with within themselves that make dealing with the issue at hand more difficult. I was just thinking about, I was trying to remember this movie while you were talking because it instantly reminded me of it. And it was the movie Countdown.
Oh, yeah.
So Countdown is a movie where you download an app, you download the Countdown app, and it tells you when exactly you're going to die. Now, most people think it's a novelty, so they download it like, oh, it's cute. I got another 50 years, or I've got another 70 years. Well, some people are like, I got a couple of days. And they're
Right.
like, ooh, I must have been one of those people. The little program just gave me a couple of days, and it's going to be like, boo, ha 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 ha. No, once the countdown hits, that's it. That's game over. It actually kills you. And if you do something to try to avoid that death, then you have broken the user agreement, and it comes for you.
Oh.
So the main character of this story, and I forget the character's name, but she's a nurse. You know, stuff goes on, and you get to the main character. She's a nurse, and she downloads the app. So her main issue is trying to avoid her death. Right.
Right.
On top of that, she is sexually harassed by a doctor at work, and she reports him. And then, but he gets to the board before she does, so he puts the blame on her. So at the same time, she's dealing with this. Oh, I feel like I'm going to die soon. She's also dealing with this work issue and these accusations at work from something that happened to her. And all of these things are motivations, and they do play part in they do come together at one point, which is also very important. If you want to have these two separate story, like compelling elements, you don't just throw it in there arbitrarily.
Right.
A has to link to B at some point. Ooh, I got spooky lighting now because my light went off.
Your green went away.
It did. Can I get it back? Can I get it back?
I mean, you look all right now.
I look good. I mean, which is, I never say that, so we're gonna fuck with. We're just gonna leave it.
Okay.
But no. So if you're going to have these extra elements, make sure that when you're adding them to your character, whether in film or in writing, like novel writing, short story, any character you're creating, make sure that whatever elements you're creating for them make sense and have some add it to the character, to the story somehow. Otherwise, you're just throwing shit out there in the ether.
Yeah. Craft distinct personalities for diversity. Give characters unique traits to stand out. These individual quirks become hooks and enhance reader engagement. When characters have distinctive personalities, readers are more likely to connect. The richness of diverse personalities adds depth and captivates the audience, making the narrative more compelling and memorable.
Your thoughts?
I feel like we should mention the cultural appropriation and
We can get into that.
where the line is, like in all of my books there's like one white person among like 10 people. Like I do a lot of diversity, and I don't make it about the diversity. It's just there's diverseness in my narrative. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like to. Okay, so let's. There's a couple of angles that we can go into. I feel like it's a really important topic, and it's really, really sensitive because the line is there, but the line's very thin. I'm a black man. I'm straight. Yeah. I'm Christian. So those are all the categories I personally fit in. So generally speaking, I can touch on any of those topics without fear of repercussion. I can discuss being black. I can discuss being male. I can discuss being straight. I can discuss being Christian. All of those things apply to me.
Cool.
I'm in a biracial relationship. I have biracial children. I can touch on all those subjects. All of those are categories. If you put everybody in little categories, little boxes, I check all those boxes. So where am I to use a queer Latin woman.
Right.
Okay, so how do we do that? For me, if I was going to have a character that was a queer Latin woman, like let's call her Mexican just for because whatever.
Okay.
So a queer Mexican woman, and we'll let the queer be ambiguous because queerness is ambiguous in its own right. The fear that most people would have is that I would approach it like a caricature. I would throw in a whole bunch of like just offensive language. She'd be making tacos or some dumb shit, just like to start the story off. And this is like almost intent, like she's making tacos with her girlfriend. Like, okay, okay. So I've established it, yes, but now I'm establishing it in the most offensive way.
Mm-hmm.
Is it immediately offensive? No. Am I saying anything derogatory? No.
No.
But I'm making a caricature of
Yes.
that character.
Yes, you are.
And a lot of people don't seem to understand caricature. So if you ever go to a fair, we'll stretch for a second. If you ever go to like a county fair or an amusement park, there's usually an artist there, and he's a caricature artist. And I've known caricature artists. That was their job. They'd go to the amusement park and they would draw caricatures. So I'm known for having slightly bigger ears, so my ears would be bigger. It exaggerates your features. That's what a caricature artist does, and that's what a caricature is. It's an extended, exaggerated variant of a person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm looking at a queer Mexican woman and I'm just thinking of the most Mexican things I can think of without really understanding Mexican culture, then I'm just making a caricature, and that's offensive. I'm not using derogatory language. I'm not using she's not doing anything offensive or wrong, but I'm making a caricature, and people don't understand the offensiveness of a caricature. Like imagine if a white person made a black character who was walking around downtown with some grape soda and a watermelon, and he was going down there to rob a liquor store. Like that is the most offensive thing you can think of, because that shows that you know nothing about being black. One of the things that I love about what you had said and the way you structure the diversity in your stories is that it seems like your characters are diverse, and that's it. Like they're not diverse for the sake of it. They're diverse because that's what the world is. I walk into a grocery store this morning.
Okay.
I was buying stuff for lunch, and I saw maybe 3 white people in the entire store.
Oh.
There's a lot of black people. I think there was a couple of Latin people, and they were just in the store. I think somebody was buying stamps, somebody was buying groceries. There was a dude in front of me buying dog food. There was a guy before work buying stuff for lunch, and they were just being people. We should acknowledge that the world is more diverse than we think it is, or in some cases, some people want it to be. And so, and I said it, quote me. When we go out into the world, if there's a random party, if we're at the grocery store and something happens, if your characters are driving down the highway and there's a traffic jam. Traffic jam's a good one. If there's a traffic jam, something happened on the highway and everyone's getting out of the car, what's the likelihood that everyone getting out of the car is going to be some middle-aged, straight, white Christian male? That's unlikely, right? White family there, and there's just going to be all these people. So recognize that your works should reflect the world around you. Now, obviously, if your world takes place in an isolated kind of place, like a small village in Peru, all right, chances are everyone there is Peruvian. That makes sense. If you're in the middle of Norway, you're going to probably have a lot of white characters.
Mhm.
So be authentic to your space, but be authentic to your space. If it's downtown Chicago, be authentic to your space. That's not an all-white space,
That's
you know,
right.
and just approach it with civility and knowledge. There is absolutely a world of people out here, and that shadow threw me off. And if you want to know what a queer Mexican woman would do first thing in the morning, I suggest finding a queer Mexican woman and asking her, "Hey, what do you do first thing in the morning?"
And there are people who do sensitivity reading, right?
Mhm.
That read those kinds of scenes and says whether or not it's offending them,
Yeah, and just ask
right?
somebody,
Just
because
ask. Just
I know
sensitivity reader.
there's this thing about being woke, and I'm not going to go into that right now. Trust me.
Oh.
If you want to hear me talk about that, I'll talk about that on my own time. But the idea of there's a difference between, oh my God, people are being woke, versus, oh my God, people actually care about how other people feel.
Mhm.
There's empathy, and empathy should not be controversial.
Right,
Respect to a culture should not be controversial.
right.
Respect should not be controversial.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it sucks that we even have to say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I
here we are.
try not to make the culture of the place match the culture of the character that is put in that situation. So, like, the guy who does like travel and portals and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
he is Native American. Now, that his being Native American has nothing to do with the culture that he is being put into, right?
Right.
So he Adam Thundercloud, which is the naming nomenclature is mentioned, like how they come up with names and like stuff like that, but that's about as far as it goes.
That makes sense because coffee. Because someone's going to ask, and you're going to get people from all sides when you have a character that's blatantly diverse, and someone's going to agree with it, someone's going to disagree with it, all from the same space.
Right.
You can't please everyone, but it helps if you did a little bit of research and you're like, hey, this is the process that Native people use, or people of this tribe use, and under those criteria, this character was thusly named. I think a really good example, if I can just bring it up real quick, is the football team of the Washington Redskins.
Oh
Not a
yeah, that's
not a
great.
wrestling reference. See, not a wrestling reference. Um, but there were so many people who were. There were some Native people who were saying that the name should be changed,
And it was.
and there's a lot of Native people who are trying to get the name changed back.
Yeah.
There's a right now. There's a story out where there's a I think either the NFL and or the Commanders are being sued because they want the name back,
Yeah.
because the logo was representative of a person, and that person, the people who represent that person are like, hey, every single time the Redskins went onto the field, this person was represented.
Mm-hmm.
So you've taken our representation back, or taken it away, and we kind of want it back. Now that's a very, very, it's a very sensitive space, and there's almost no winner, because you're in one of those situations where the character of the Redskins logo
Right.
is going to upset some, and taking it away is going to upset others. You know, same thing with the Aunt
Oh,
Jemima
yeah.
on the and Uncle
Yeah.
Ben and all these other things. Like
Mhm.
these characters were originally used as caricatures, and they were offensive caricatures, which is why they eventually had those names and those labels changed.
Mhm.
But there were people attached to those caricatures. And so when those people were attached to those caricatures and you removed the caricature, you did it for the right reason. But now someone's like, yo, that was my great 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 grandmother who was represented in that graphic. So now you've taken the legacy of my family away. And so
Mm.
all that's to say that you're not going to make everyone happy. You're going to piss some people off.
Mhm.
Walk into your story knowing that. However you represent someone who looks like that or represents that category is going to be upset. It's to be had. So you
So
want to minimize it, and the best way to minimize that is to relate to a person from said space. If I want to write a queer character, I should probably find a queer friend and yet like, yo, read this for me and tell me how you feel about it. Like reading
I
that, tell me how you feel.
I am hunting for someone who is Vietnamese and understands Vietnamese enough to do the accent.
Hmm.
That is what is preventing me from making an audiobook of Hope's Chest, because she talks to her mother, who is full-blooded Vietnamese and married a GI.
Yeah. I'd go on Fiverr. That sounds like the kind of
Oh,
space that
Fiverr.
I'd go on Fiverr for that because that's such a worldwide space. But that's a great example though. Like you could just find any old person to do that, and the way that they make the accent could be offensive to someone. Do you know the comedian Angela Johnson?
Mhm.
So Angela Johnson has the nail lady, right, as a
The
character,
nail lady. Yeah,
Amy
yeah,
the nail
yeah.
lady. So I've seen her do stand up live a couple of times, and one of the times that she did it, she explained that the where she does that accent because she herself is Latina. Uh, she's of Mexican descent, so she's clearly not Vietnamese. So her family's not represented there. So when she does that accent, she doesn't mean offense by it, but she learned it from a Vietnamese friend of hers, someone who's from that culture, and kind of gave her a tip on how to,
What the
accentuate those
nuances,
words
yeah.
and use it.
Yeah.
For people on YouTube, Uncle Roger, everyone loves Uncle Roger. Uncle Roger, the character himself, the guy, uh, Nigel.
Mhm.
Nigel is, I think, Cambodian, and
I
he's I forget exactly where he's from, but the accent is representative of like a grandfather of his, right? And so he's basing it off of someone from that culture that he is familiar with. And I think that's the biggest, drawing the circle back to the beginning. If you're going to create a character that's going to be diverse or different, at least from you, we'll say
Mhm.
that. A
Mhm.
character that's not a category you fit in, a box that you wouldn't tick. Um, find someone who does tick those boxes, talk to them, become familiar with them. Um, to the writers, here's a tax tip: if you go on a trip to visit the space, the trip and the expenses are tax deductible once you actually make a product from it.
Oh.
So, like, if you needed to write a book about Salem, hey, talk to your tax professional. I ain't one. That's not a box I tick. So, talk to your tax professional. But if you were writing a book about Salem,
Mm.
Massachusetts, and
Yeah.
you take a trip to Salem, Massachusetts, that trip is technically a work trip because you're doing
Oh, yeah,
research for
if
your book.
writing is your business, yeah.
Yeah. So, if writing is your business and you're writing a book on Salem, and it's a business expense. So don't sit there and worry about the cost. I mean, obviously you got some upfront cost, but that's just work. That's one of the hats that you wear that we're always talking about.
Right.
That's part of the Omni hat, but those are there's tax deductions for that, so you can work on that. You can work through that, and don't let something as simple as money or time keep you from learning about the culture that you're trying to represent, because you're always trying to represent. And to people who are from a marginalized group or from a minority, representation is essential.
Essential.
It's essential. It's not just nice or cool, it's essential. There are young people who need to grow up and see characters that look like them in their media. They have to.
Yeah. Discuss the role of character development in driving horror narrative. In horror narratives, emotional investment is crucial, achieved through well-developed characters. When characters are intricately crafted, readers form a strong connection, especially when facing terrifying situations. The connection heightens reader engagement and amplifies the impact of fear and tension. Multidimensional characters not only intensify the horror experience, but also create a compelling narrative bond, immersing readers in the unsettling world of the story. I love putting a horror-themed character in a mundane setting.
Mm-hmm.
That is some of the most fun RP I think I've ever done. For instance, it was a high school kid put in a high school situation, but the kid sold bodies to necrophiliacs. He was a serial killer. And by making him the monster, it makes him like relatable.
Yeah.
And there should be conflict for sure.
Oh, it's
naturally, right? And normally that conflict comes in the form of fear. So fear amplification is key. The characters with fears readers can relate to enhance the overall horror experience. When characters grapple with terrifying situations, readers vicariously experience the terror through their reactions.
Yeah.
This dynamic intensifies the narrative, creating a more gripping and immersive story. So I notice in certain movies that are in first person, you now in later movies, you hear like the breathing of the cameraman, or you see the walking of the camera.
Yeah.
Right. So that hearing that person is gasping makes you want to gasp.
It does. It's like the sneeze. If someone sneezes, you sneeze, or if someone yawns, you're like if someone sneezes, your first thought's like you just start twitching your nose. You're just like you don't even realize it happens. Like the next time someone sneezes around you, you're gonna see yourself do it.
Oh, just like twitch my nose.
Yeah, and it's
yawns.
You want your character to be relatable.
Mm-hmm.
You want, because again, it's representation, and even if it's the simplest of representation, as in person with feelings, You want, if you're a person with feelings, you want your character, the character you're watching, to be a person with feelings that you can relate to. If you're a parent, you know, and the character's a parent. If you're married and there's a married couple on screen, if the person just lost their mother and you've recently lost your mother, then you can relate. Something as simple as that. Representation doesn't necessarily have to be like racial, cultural, or anything like that. Sometimes it's just life situation.
Right.
They're one of the best examples I can think of that is the best zombie movie to ever exist, Train to Busan.
Okay.
Train to Busan is the greatest zombie movie ever.
The first one, yeah.
Yes, the only one that actually counts. we don't talk about Peninsula. We don't talk about Peninsula. Mm-hmm. And they're remaking it, so ignore that. Well, we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
But in Train to Busan, it's a guy and his daughter. Mm-hmm. Daughter's about 7 years old. At the time the movie came out, my daughter was about 7 years old.
So you automatically
I was a busy dad, and I had my kid, and I'm just like, I can relate to being busy and that fear that I have of not being an attentive enough father. There's a scene at the beginning where he needs something for her birthday, and he buys her something that he already bought her, which shows how he's not paying attention. Which is also a very good character trait, like to show and not tell. And that's
show not tell. Yeah.
Show and not tell is one of those things that's the hardest thing for a writer to do, because you want to tell us everything, right? Exposition is important. But by showing that the gift that he bought, he already had, shows that he doesn't pay attention to her from year to year, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's not like he forgot that he bought it. It's that he didn't see her playing with it or doesn't see it in the room. So it shows his lack of attention without necessarily saying, oh, you're an absent dad.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's a character arc. We should discuss character arcs. And without spoiling it. I mean, you can probably piece together.
It's hard not to, but right. I get it.
So I'll try. But I'll say that there's a moment at the end, essentially the finale, that I, as a father, have the hardest time watching, even to this day. Mm-hmm. That when I see that ending, as a father, I'm slightly getting emotional right now just thinking about it.
Just thinking about it.
Yeah, literally right now, my eyes are starting to well. It's such a compelling ending. And it's not just in how it was shot fantastically. Like cinematically, it was just an amazingly shot ending, like closing, like finale. But just the circumstance of what is happening.
Yeah.
It's moving in such a deep way. And if I wasn't a father, it would still be sad, but it wouldn't be as sad. If my daughter wasn't that age at the time that I first watched it, it wouldn't have impacted me as bad. If my kid was 2 or my kid was 12, it would not have impacted me the way that it did. But the fact that I was a dad who had a kid that same age and this situation takes place at the end, like I wasn't kidding. Like, I'm dead serious. Like, that's how moving. Like, that's 2016.
That representation is profound.
It is. And it was just representing me as a father, a busy dad. And that was representation. That's it. I'm not Korean. So, I'm not Korean. So, like, it's not like I see myself in his face, but I see myself in his life, you know? And when you develop that character, and I guess we can transition, I don't know what your notes say, but we'll go ahead and transition into character arcs. You need there to be a transformation in your character. That's what a character arc is.
Yes, absolutely.
So a character arc is where your character is one way at the beginning and is essentially the opposite at the end. There has to be some sort of personal change
Yep,
in your
right
character.
here. Characters
And
undergoing significant changes contribute to the overall resonance.
right, because imagine if there is a space for this. So I'll put an asterisk on it. But if your character at the beginning is acts one way, behaves one way, lives one way, thinks one way, and then comes out at the other end of it the exact same way,
Then you did something wrong.
they there's a space for it, and it's not a big space. It's a very, very tiny space.
Okay.
But if your character, but I would say 99 times out of 100, if your character should change. There should be some sort of some emotional change, some lifestyle change, some viewpoint change.
Yeah.
You should learn. So as a person, we should learn from all of our experiences, right? Every lesson is every life, situation is a lesson, right? And even when you fail at something, that's a lesson, right?
Right. That's
Your L should stand for lesson, not loss.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a good one. I like that one. Write that one down.
Mm.
So your character should go through something and come out different on the other end, right?
Mhm.
Stronger, more inspired, more sympathetic. We'll go with that's the strength of a final girl. I mentioned Scream all the time because one of my favorite horrors. Sidney Prescott at the beginning of Scream versus Sidney Prescott at the end of Scream, as she progressively gets stronger from movie to movie. There's a point where throughout the franchise, like at the beginning, she picks up the phone and she's listening to Ghostface and she's scared and she's terrified. And then later on in the series, I think like in Scream 2022, she gets a call from the killer and she's like, "Yeah, I'm bored of this." And she just hangs up on the dude. The serial killer after her, and she just hangs up on him. That's the badass transformation over 5 films of the character of Sidney Prescott. Because going through all this and surviving it time and time again is going to make you stronger. So through your character arcs, which is super important, and to tie it back to where we were, that's why your characters have to be compelling. This is why
That's what makes them compelling, really.
Yeah, in the end, but you have to make them relatable so that there is something to relate to, and so that there's something to change and there's a transformation possible, and then we can relate to that endeavor. I mean, yeah, that's the gist of it. The character arc.
That is the gist of it.
And you got to make sure that whatever situation you're putting your character in, when they come out of it on the other side, the response, the character arc, the ending of the arc makes sense. It always has to make sense.
Yeah. Let's see. Relatable imperfections. And these imperfections will eventually be overcome.
Right.
Usually. In the change. Readers connect deeply when characters face challenges mirroring their own. The challenge of having a 7-year-old in your stead, or attached to you in some manner, and that is the challenge that is mirroring your own. The challenge of being a father.
When I was watching Train to Busan, I saw a dad with a 7-year-old, and I was a dad with a 7-year-old, and I'm like, I get you, dude. My daughter wears dress just like that. She acts just like that. The little
more
girl.
Relatable the struggles, the stronger the character's reader connection, the stronger the narrative is, right? Imperfect characters become vessels for reader empathy, fostering a more engaging and emotionally resonant narrative. Clear motivations, which are the arcs, basically, like define their goals, fears, and desires. Readers naturally root for characters with understandable and compelling reasons for their actions.
And that applies to the villain as well.
Yes.
This cannot be ignored or skipped over. It is so
Cannot
important,
be ignored.
especially in 2024, especially in like modern time, that if you're gonna like your villain is clearly doing wrong, which is why they're the villain. But wrong is such a subjective term. You know what I mean?
Nobody thinks they're the bad guy.
No one thinks they're the bad guy. That's the perfect way of putting it. Like, so it's weird to say that wrong is
Uh-oh. Frozen. And I'm not recording on... Oh, shit.
Oh, we're back.
Oh, you're back. Okay.
I don't know.
Can
We
you
were both just
say
on there.
that thing that you were saying? Yeah.
Yeah. So
To include villains.
right. So to include villains in this concept of the justifying what you're doing, everyone feels like no one thinks they're the bad guy, right? And like I said, it's weird to say that the wrong thing to do is subjective, but it is. Because if it's clear, like morally, it's wrong to punch somebody in the face. Okay. But if someone was bothering you and harassing you, punching them in the face is justified to you.
Right.
Assault is still wrong, but to you, it's justified. Even if you didn't necessarily. And then if someone is, when that person that's confronting you in the first place, to them, they might be standing up for themselves or standing up for their brother or sister or their mom or dad or husband, wife, whatever the situation is. But so to them, getting in your face is the right thing to do.
Right.
And you, in turn, this guy's approaching you, so you punch him in the face. To you, it's self-defense. You're not wrong. You can look at, Will Smith, Chris Rock at the Oscars.
Absolutely.
Will
Great
Smith,
example.
to get up on stage and punch the host in the face is objectively wrong. That is objectively the wrong thing to do. But to Will Smith, he was defending his wife. And he felt like that was something he had to do in that moment. To be fair, he has later apologized and recognized that what he did was wrong. We'll give him that credit. But in that moment, he felt that that was the right thing to do. And he did it. To him, yelling out, "Keep my wife's name out of your mouth," was not wrong, even though he did that live at the Oscars. That was not wrong to him. But to Chris Rock, in the viewpoint of everybody else, that was objectively wrong. And you'll see situations like that where some people are going to relate to Chris Rock. How dare, it's amazing that he was able to have such restraint and not respond with other violence. And other people are going to be like, you shouldn't have talked smack about Will Smith's wife. Will Smith had to do something. He couldn't just sit there and just not respond and not. So there's going to be people who are going to relate to your protagonist and people who are going to relate to your antagonist. And I think an antagonist is so compelling if part of you is like, I get it. It wasn't the right thing to do, going on a murder spree. But I kind of get what his motivation was. I kind of understand. And if you can kind of relate to the
challenge, it's that challenge, right? That it's just a matter of how you treat the challenge that it designates you as the villain or the antagonist rather, and the protagonist.
Because it could just very well be the viewpoint that the narrator happens to be giving you. If you're looking at the situation
objectively,
the American Revolution from the viewpoint of Britain.
Right. The British Civil War, as they put it.
Right. Who is the antagonist? If you look at the American Revolution, let me correct myself. The American Revolution. If you look at the American Revolution from the British viewpoint, who's the villain?
Right.
It's these rebels over here who are rebelling against the status quo. They're showing themselves in the viewpoint of the king. These people are being so ungrateful of the majesty of my kingdom. Yeah. How dare they?
How dare they?
all the things that we've given them, all the safety and consideration that we've done. We defended I think they defended the colony in the French. There's a French war they had right before the American Revolution, and so they're like, we just defended you against the French, and this is how you repay us. This is the thanks we get for that. America would look like the villain. It would be really easy to paint that picture. It's all has to do with the vantage point, because as Americans, we looked at the British as the antagonists, as the villains,
Right.
because they were imposing these crazy taxes. And so it's very important that when you're creating these characters, your viewpoint and your vantage point is very important. The justification of your antagonist is also very important, because that makes your antagonist very compelling. And when your reader is looking at the bad guy and thinking, I don't know, because now it gives you an element of toss and turn, sort of between who do I really root for, and it makes you kind of question
love
yourself.
to hate, or yeah,
exactly, because true horror fans, we always have our favorite final girls. We always have our favorite villains. We love a good villain. We love
a good villain.
Like a Michael Myers who doesn't have to talk. He doesn't have to give you a final monologue. He just shows up, shanks you, and walks off. Like, that's a badass. We love the shape, and it's a beautiful thing. Someone like a Freddy, like an early Freddy, who can be quirky and quippy and then just like come after you in the very creative ways. We love that. And no matter who puts on the mask, who doesn't love a good ghost face?
Yeah. So present characters with internal conflicts and moral dilemmas. How they process their internal conflict and moral dilemmas is going to separate them from a villain or an antagonist to a protagonist, right?
Right.
Force characters to confront tough decisions and ethical challenges. These struggles engage readers emotionally, fostering a deeper connection. When characters grapple with their beliefs or face difficult choices, readers become more invested in their journey. The exploration of moral complexities, adds layers
As complex as that word was.
the narrative, making it more compelling and thought-provoking.
P's and X's get me too. Like, it's just But no, like you have to have like those depths and that
For
moral. Yes, that I'm just leaning right down on the villain.
Yeah.
That moral conflict, just like you said, like it's so much. The protagonist, your main character, is going to have a conflict. Your antagonist is going to have a conflict. The real difference is how they're expressing it.
And that's really what your plot points are about, is your villain basically reminding the hero that I exist.
And it's, I think, a good example, because I talk about Scream a lot, but Scream 5 and 6. So Scream 2022 and then Scream 6. I'll spoil Scream 6. It's fine. It's been out long enough.
It's been
it's been at least a year. So the antagonists are connected to the villains of the 5th movie. So the villains of the 6th movie are connected to the villains of the 5th movie. And I can say that without a full spoil. And so that's their motivation. They're getting revenge on behalf of their family member, right? So to them, someone has hurt their child.
Right.
So they feel justified in what they're doing.
Right.
And that in itself makes sense. I mean, I don't know a parent in the world who would say, let somebody hurt my babies and see what happens.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know a parent in the world who wouldn't at least, even in just sarcastically or exaggerating, say something along those lines. Say something
Mhm.
like, if you hurt my baby, the same thing will happen to you. And
Right.
that's relatable. That's relatable. Someone simply saying, you will not hurt my wife or you will regret it. Something as simple as that. That's relatable. So when the antagonist, when the villain, the bad guy has a justifiable reason, you're kind of like, okay, I get it. And
Mhm.
sometimes, like in the case of Scream 6, to them, the killing spree that they went on made perfect sense to them.
Made perfect sense.
And that's just good character development on part of the writers of that film. Because when you have these characters exploring themselves and saying, if I do this terribly horrible, no good, very bad thing, sure, why not? Okay, just do it. And then they do it, and you're like, why would you
Wow.
do that? And they're like, oh, here's my good reason why. I mentioned last week the book Afraid, and
Yeah. Afraid. Yeah.
so those antagonists they're mind controlled super soldiers. They're just following orders.
Right.
They're a little bit more in depth than that, but I don't want to spoil that because it's such a good book.
Mhm.
Um, but when you see that these people are acting with no moral compass and they're just following orders and doing what they do, you're like, okay, they're just soldiers. They're just kind of doing what they're doing.
They're doing
And
what they're told. Yeah.
yeah, so are they really the bad guy? Or is it the orders that they're being given? Is that person the bad guy? And
Right.
there's motivations behind the guy who gave the orders. Does it ultimately justify it in the general moral scape? No, that's why they're the villain.
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
why they're the bad guy.
That's
But that's the point, though. You do want your antagonist typically to be relatable, almost to the point where you can almost be like, that could be me. Under
that could be
different
me.
circumstances, that could be me. And
Mm.
then you start cheering for the bad guy because there are sometimes the killer is the main character. There are some spaces like that. And they're just trying to defend their home or just get revenge on the death of their mother. Poor Mrs. Voorhees. And yeah, that's the fun part. That's the fun part of horror, because we have this wholly different space where we can look at the absolute darkest, ugliest parts of real life society. Because you can just flip the news on for about 25 minutes and see so many horrors going on in the world. That's real life stuff. Those are real deaths.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
real compelling. So the beauty of our genre is that we can take those real life types of horrors
And make them
and
mundane.
really explore them in a way that's relatable. Like you can take any given war, any given hostage situation, any given terrorist situation, and you can take a deep dive on putting a regular person in such an extraordinary situation and
Mm.
follow them through it.
Mhm.
Even Squid Games is good
Oh, I
because
haven't. Surprisingly, I haven't watched Squid Game yet,
I'm gonna need you to stop what you're doing after this and just watch
and
all of it,
just watch
all
all of
like
it.
the whole series. Because essentially, and I'll just talk about the first episode. Essentially, what you have is you have a main character. Before there's a series of main characters, players of the game. And everyone there is in financial struggles, right?
Right.
Everyone can relate to financial struggles,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that equates to you. Sometimes only having $1 million in your bank account is a financial struggle. I wish to be you.
I wish you. Yeah.
But, they're going through a financial struggle. And this person approaches them and says, hey, you're going through a financial struggle. What if I said there's a way that you can instantly have all your troubles go away? And I can provide that way to you. And that's essentially what Squid Games is. It's a
Oh.
bunch of people who are in financial issues. They're all their own different miscellaneous troubles. And the Squid Games is their way of getting out of that struggle. And you can relate to all the different the struggles because one person has a sick mom, one person has trying to get custody of their brother because they're like orphans, and another person's trying to save their parents' business or whatever, or and they all have these honest struggles. Someone can relate to some of them, and you know they're put in a situation where to them it's like, this is the only way I know to get out of my struggle.
Mm-hmm.
But the bad guy's like, we didn't do anything wrong. We offered you this opportunity and you said yes. You chose to be here. And
You
I'll
chose.
spoil this
You
one part.
signed the waiver. Yeah.
I'll spoil this one part. There is a waiver. And one of the clauses of this waiver is that if everyone here agrees, or at least majority votes, you get to leave.
Yeah.
Y'all can just walk out the door. And
Yeah.
at one point, there is a vote. There is a vote. And like I said, I'll spoil this one part because it doesn't ultimately change the ending at all. But at one point, they all vote to end the games. And the people who are in charge of the games honor the agreement.
Ah.
And they say, doors open, we'll let you out. We'll drop you back off at home. And we're done.
Oh.
We're not going to like hunt you down. We're not going to like do anything to you, but you're going to walk out with exactly what you walked in with. There you go. And they did. And they left them alone. But they all called back because they realized that their situation was so bad. So they chose it not once, but twice.
Yeah.
And that just shows how deep the struggles are.
Yeah.
And you relate to that. And then the bad guy gets to wash their hands of it. It's like, yo, not okay, we'll let you off the first time because you didn't know what you were getting into. But after that, you came back. You came back knowing exactly what it was. So who's the bad guy here? Who can you be mad at?
Mm-hmm.
Are you mad at the hosts? No. Are you mad at the struggle? Can you hate the game? Like
You can, but
they chose it.
But they
chose
chose
it knowing what's going into it. And it's crazy like that. It's a great series to watch. You need to watch that. Like, it's just,
I will watch it today. Mm-hmm.
Like, binge that. It's really, really good.
Okay. I also heard that it was unscripted.
I have a hard time believing that, but it's too structured to be unscripted. There's probably a lot of improv. I'll give it that. But no, I mean, it's a series. The series the story had to go a certain way. That's a really interesting note. I know we're hitting up on the hour, but it's a very interesting note, the idea of improv in both writing, kind of like writing off the cuff and kind of like just letting your pen do what it wants, or if you're doing film, letting your characters just kind of do what they do and just kind of going with it.
Yeah.
There's space for that. And there's a lot of space for that, honestly, because sometimes you're in a situation, and as long as you go from A to B, the story is fine. I feel compelled to relate this to wrestling. When a wrestler does a promo, sometimes you only have like a certain motivation. It's like, promote the event that's coming up next week and say this line so that the other guy can react to it and say his line, and you guys can set up a fight later on tonight.
Sure.
Whatever you say in the middle is whatever. So there's a big point in time, especially back in the late 90s, they would say, okay, Mr. Stone Cold Steve Austin, say A, B, and C, fill in the blanks with whatever else Stone Cold Steve Austin would say. And they just improv the line, and that made the show so compelling, because sometimes the wrestlers are genuinely just playing off of each other just naturally. And
Just
when you
volleying
see
it.
that, yeah,
Yeah.
and when you see that natural build between one character and another character, because I've said before, professional wrestling is just a story character from one story forced to interact with a story character in another,
In
and
another.
how that works out. And seeing those natural interactions makes the interaction genuine. And when you
Mhm.
feel like that genuine emotion is there, that genuine response is there, it's intriguing, it's relatable, and that's what gets people caught up in the story of professional wrestling. Um,
And horror, for that matter.
exactly with
Like,
horror. Well, so I just watched Talk to Me, the movie Talk to Me with the hand,
mhm.
and I learned that the actress that does the lead, she auditioned in character, right? She did the character part,
Oh,
the
okay.
possession part. She did the
Uh-huh.
possession part, and she was so good at it
Uh-huh.
that all the other characters who have to do a possession scene modeled their acting off of her as opposed to the script.
Oh.
So that's the importance of having someone really embody your character, because now you had the way she portrays the possession, and everyone else modeled their possession after her.
So
So
she's the
having that,
OG. Yeah.
right, so that's the original reaction. That's how it all plays in. And having that development, having that trust in improv and that space for improv, to
Mhm.
be willing to say, you know what, here's a situation I didn't expect. Let's play with it. Let's see where it naturally goes. And being able to be on your feet and spontaneous, sometimes if you follow your outline, you're going to have a very stale story.
It
As a
depends on
writer,
how you outline, I think.
depends, but you still have to leave space for spontaneity.
Improv. Yeah.
You gotta, that spontaneity. It's it's that age old question between being a pantser and a
Oh,
plotter. And
I'm a
if you plot
planner.
yourself,
Yeah.
I'm a pantser.
I'm a planner.
I there's one series that I wrote that wasn't horror, but I literally just stood in front of the computer and said, "Okay," and I just wrote the story out from there. I didn't draw out anything, and the storyline that I had planned, my characters completely went in a wholly different direction, and it gave me the most compelling through line like possible. And I'm like so thankful the characters in my story gave me the space, and that I didn't hold myself just to my plot, my pre-planned plot. Ooh, that was hard. And
Pre-planned. Yeah.
yeah, see, yeah, that was
Yeah,
tricky.
that's kind of right.
um, so as a writer in horror, open yourself up to allow the scary to be scary, and then write down what you feel and see. You know, sure,
Yes.
you might think it goes one way, but let the fears flow. And some of my horror ideas are based on situations that I fear the most. Like I have
Mhm.
anxiety, like crazy anxiety, and in a situation, I'm like, all right, I turned my car left and things worked out. And then I look behind me where if I had turned right, I'd have been face to face with this car wreck or whatever. And
Mhm.
I'm like, well, what would happen if I got into a car wreck today? You know, my kid's in the car with me. Where would my struggle be? Or my wife's waiting at work to be picked up. Where is her struggle be? And then
Mhm.
you can take something like that, like she's not being picked up from work on time, and maybe the conflict is taking place at her workplace, and she wouldn't have been there had I not got into the car accident. But now that she's still there, she's now faced to deal with that struggle.
Right.
There's a whole story right there. Starts
There
off
is.
with a starts off with a car accident. The husband can't pick her up. She's late getting picked up. She's stuck there, and now she's stuck facing dealing with a conflict of, I don't know, a hostile takeover or whatever, a hostage situation.
Mhm.
You never know. And your story can start off something as simple as that, all based on I saw an accident behind me in the rearview mirror.
Mhm.
It was my fear of what would happen if that led me to explore that story. And just as I just now made that up, sitting here, give yourself that space for improv, because you can be sitting there, go for lunch, something happens at the restaurant, and you come back, somebody yells, some employee yelling or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You come back and thinking, well, how would I respond to that? Start pulling your pen out and you start writing. And you realize, what if my character had gone through that? Now your character's gone to lunch, sees the situation, and goes through it. Give yourself that space for improv. It's the beauty of being a writer that trusts themselves.
And there's a lot to say about doing writing to get the mood of of the characters before you introduce the challenges, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, because I was just thinking about that as we were talking. I was thinking about a project I'm working on, and I'm like, there's something I can do in this scene that I've already written where I can create a narrative for my character to create this like emotional connect. You know, like I was trying to, she's a single woman. So I was thinking of starting off with pictures of her in her house, her with a guy, and then her later with a guy, and then her by herself, then her with her best friend, and then show, like, just to show and not tell. And you can see where she was in a relationship and then she was single and now she's relying on her best friend for comfort. And it's simple. You can do that just by panning and showing 5 photographs on a desk, right? A really simple like character trait to add. No words stated, no exposition given, and it now tells you that you're dealing with a woman who is alone, who is maybe still struggling for that loss of love. Maybe she's still hungry for love, and there will be a character who cares for her, and she might be latching onto that so tightly that
Like
it
the best
guides
friend.
her. It guides her motivations through the course of the story. So,
Right.
and I just thought of that during this stream.
Yeah, that's
So,
amazing. Holy
and
crap.
again, that's one of the things I'm saying is like, give yourself space for that spontaneity. I just thought of it randomly because we were talking about
And the
character.
cool thing is that every writer could take that concept and twist it just a little bit to make it their own.
That could fit
And they would
any
be different stories across the board, just based on that one example.
that one process of using photographs. You can write it, and not just showing things in film. You could take your pen and say, as we walked in, she walks past the picture of her and her ex-husband, and moves it across the room or whatever it is that she does, and or we see the picture of something, she puts her face down, or something as simple as that. And you can write those things out however blue of the wall you need. And again, you can put that in any situation. Who's in the photograph? Is it her parents? Because now we're dealing with loss of family. Is it her and her children? Now it's a loss of children. You can use it as a time passing montage.
Yes.
And it could be mom with dad, mom with kids, and then more mom with kids, and then like a sick picture of mom with kids, and then like kids with dad, and then the kid by themselves, and now the kid is now we've transitioned from the mom to an adult version of the kid, and the montage is just in photographs like that.
Yeah.
And it could be any of those things, but by introducing that visual of the parents, let's say it's a ghost story, and those parents are going to come back as ghosts. We know what they look like now, without having to say or do much. All we did was show them in photographs.
Yeah.
And it could be something that simple. She can be just sitting there coming home from work and looking at the pictures on the shelves, and the narrative part that you're writing is how she feels while looking at those pictures.
Right.
Something as simple as that. In film, it's literally a pan. It can just be a pan. Um, and that's how you develop a character. That right there is the show don't tell. There's so much you can introduce into a character, but however you do it, now we've learned about the character in a way that's relatable and that's going to impact how they're going to react to this conflict that they're about to walk into.
And draw out an emotion in the reader,
Yeah.
which is usually accompanied by some kind of like relation to it.
Because if something terrible happens to your best friend or your next door neighbor, that's one emotional response. If something happens to your mom or your child, that's a wholly
Whole
different
other
emotional
response.
response. So by saying that this person is connected to them deeply, was super close to them, that relates one way and you expect a response a certain way. Even if you just say they weren't close and they didn't even like each other, and then forced to now, do you save the mom that you've been mad at for the last 20 years?
Yeah.
Do you save them? Are you quick to save them? Do you fail at saving them because you stalled because you were still bitter? And
Was
now do
it?
you deal with the
Yeah.
regret? There's so many, something as simple as that, those simple elements. And that's the beauty of writing in our space, our horror space, is that you can explore that in every angle to every degree. And
Yeah.
you can go in so many different ways just by a mother-daughter relationship, right? That mother-daughter relationship can go a million different ways.
Sure
And
can.
how you respond to that can take your story into a million different directions. And that way you can take that same trope, because we always talk about our subgenres and their tropes.
Mm-hmm.
Not every trope is going to go the same way. Cabin in the Woods is not going to be the same as The Blackening, even though they all involve a cabin in the woods.
Mm-hmm. They both have the trope.
Right, but their stories are going to be different depending on how you've established these characters. And
Exactly.
that's the importance of character development, because Evil Dead is not Cabin in the Woods,
Right.
it's not Cabin Fever, it's not The Blackening.
Mm-hmm.
All of those are Cabin in the Wood tropes.
Mm-hmm.
What was the one with Batista? Um,
Oh,
the new one, the
Batista,
newer,
the
the new, the M. Night Shyamalan one.
oh, I don't know.
Oh, but that movie. So there's that movie, the M. Night Shyamalan movie with Dave Bautista in it, where the four people come and say, "We're here to save the world, but you have to sacrifice one of your family members." That movie, it's going to bug me, so I figured it out. So there's that movie. There's Cabin Fever, Cabin in the Woods, The Blackening, Evil Dead. All of those movies are Cabin in the Wood tropes, but um, how you develop those characters makes all those movies different. They're all different movies because your characters are doing something different. Your characters have different personalities. Your characters are reacting to stimuli a different way. And so you can, microphones off. And so,
Right.
um,
Right. Right. I got
so, so that's the importance of a good character, is that you can live in a space, a trope space, and still be different.
Absolutely.
What
Well,
more do you got?
if you like this episode at any point, stick with us for another episode where next week we will talk about crafting chilling plot twists.
Oh boy.
For our YouTube listeners, I encourage you to drop a like. And if you want to see more episodes like this one, I would advise that you subscribe and maybe even ring that bell on the off chance that YouTube actually notifies you when we premiere an episode. We will catch you guys on the flip side.